With a variety of fantasy settings and also modern ones in this particular week's video, you may find one of the manhwas might suit to your tastes. Manhwa titles are timestamped in the video for your convenience. Our first manhwa for this week is Combat Ward, a modern action manhwa that I've currently read up to chapter 58 on. Its main character is Kang Sun-woo, a high school individual whom we are introduced to during an interesting period of time that his parents are actually held captive. Somehow, he's able to thwart those that threaten his parents, but they're all moved to a hospital. After some explanation and overall worry for his family, Sun-woo is introduced to the Combat Ward, a place where, as long as he's in there, it will guarantee the treatment costs and safety of his parents for a cost, theoretically. The Combat Ward is truly just a place where people will fight, but there are also experiments as drugs or boosters are given to them which enhance different traits from power and speed as examples. There are actually quite a variety that the dopes that contestants consume. Sun-woo though is a little bit of a special case. He doesn't want to do it and his body actually can't absorb it. What will he discover as he heads into potentially his own end to protect his family? The story is 7 out of 10. The surface level plot is quite easy to follow and track as it mostly follows Sun-woo's journey into the ward. What's nice from a story perspective is clearly there's just something more going on from the betting VIPs, the actual personnel of the ward, and even the individual fighters themselves. The characters are 8 out of 10. As noted, there are a multitude of fighters that have joined this fighting ward. Each have their own stories, which allows for some reasonable breaks in between the moments that look to grow from Sun-woo's perspective. Otherwise, there's just no such thing as character development other than in pure strength or fighting. The art is 9 out of 10. Pure, raw, over-exaggerated action is the name of the game here. The art is definitely odd, in some cases honestly quite a bit, considering the amount of physical deformation that goes on. Otherwise, if you enjoy more raw fighting action overall, this should definitely hit the spot. So if you're a fan of modern action manhwas that evokes almost Squid Game type vibes from its initial impression but with a lot more fighting in it, Combat Ward would definitely be something to look at. This next manhwa to take a look at is Caught in the Dark Navy Admiral's Net, a fantasy romance manhwa that I've currently read up to chapter 41 on. The protagonist of this story is Sela Cardi, or at least an individual who reincarnated as Sela, as she is just a background character in a novel that our version of Sela read in her previous life. In that previous life, she was a marine biologist who loved the sea. Anyway, being a fan of the main female lead and a little scared of the villain, Admiral Elam, Sela is able to prevent the initial plot from transpiring. But in response, she gets involved with Elam as she tries to plan out her new life as Sela Cardi. As time goes on, Sela notices that Elam isn't actually bad as she thought he was from her novel reading, and he even helps her get her dream house by the sea. Sela is now able to enjoy new life, but there's clearly more than meets the eye here. The story is 8 out of 10. A life by the sea for a marine biologist feels like a dream life. The added flair of magical powers that Sela has to be able to enjoy her study and work in the sea is a nice little touch. Add that with the fact that this is a romance manhwa allows a more positive and uplifting atmosphere that for now hasn't been disturbed too much. The characters are 9 out of 10. As for the romance, considering the circumstances for both Sela and Elam, they are both quite the socially awkward and naive individuals, at least for romantic relationships. What I like is that their explanation is at least believable and not too forced. It allows some leeway for the main couple's actions and enough room for an actual relationship to blossom. The art is 8 out of 10. A manhwa that heavily focuses on marine life and the sea is a breath of fresh air. While yes, other manhwas may have underwater sections or some more sea-based content, it isn't so relaxing and refreshing as this one. The only weird caveat is of course the fantasy world that has pretty much most of the exact same things on Earth, but I'll just let that one slide. So if you're a fan of fantasy romance manhwa and a backdrop of marine life and the sea are something that you personally enjoy or find interesting, then Caught in the Dark Navy Admiral's Net may just entrap you in it. How to Survive as a Wandering Knight is the first of 2 shorter stories I have for you this week. It's a fantasy manhwa that I've currently read up to chapter 25 on. Johann Eitz is the name of its main character, and he is the bastard son of the Eitz noble family who lived among commoners. Living quite quietly, Johann was satisfied with his life and had varying relationships with his half-siblings, the proper heirs and children of his father. On one fateful day, though, the Ait's family is invaded by the Empire's elite forces and eliminated for treason. It mattered not if it was true or false, the result was the same. The whole entire countryside eliminated. That is, except for Johann, who, through some twisted fate, was able to survive and even become a disciple to a great assassin. From here, he wants revenge, but he knows it's not possible. So he travels the land to go on an adventure to actually become strong enough to face the empire that wiped out his home. The potential is 8 out of 10. An introduction that, as I've said before, quite common in these types of manhwa. Johann going on an adventure that will allow him to take on the empire is quite the daunting task. He has to travel as incognito as possible, and even then there are times when things can get dangerous. Will he be able to recruit allies? What are the other actions of the empire? Why is it that the empire cleansed these nobles? Too many questions, so little answers. The art is 7 out of 10. Decent initial action, there is a lot more exposition and introduction to the whole world that goes on in these early chapters. The fact that it goes through these steps right away leads me to believe that this has some potential for future gains, especially art department action-wise. This doesn't detract from those early combat scenes we see, but you can very much tell it's one-sided and not in Johann's favor. So if you enjoy newer stories, like fantasy action-adventure manhwas where the main character experiences a significant tragedy that forces him to grow, then How to Survive as a Wandering Knight might be something to start reading. The other shorter story I have for you this week is Foresighting Politician, a modern political manhwa that I can read up to chapter 15 on. The focus of this plot is on Kang Do-jun, a young adult whose family was ruined by a giant conglomerate corporation of modern Korea. Vowing to be able to get revenge, he realized that he wouldn't be able to do so unless he utilized one of the only things that could help him against any chaebol family: political power. So now, he has been doing everything he can to slowly gather and gain support to maybe one day realize his ambitions. At least, at the moment, he's still a youngling in the party that does all he can with what he has. Until one day, he has a dream that seemingly was of an event that happens in the future. So what? He has foresight now? The potential is 8 out of 10. A genre that is getting more and more representation these days, this manhwa is definitely a true political one. Working his way through the ladder and positions, Do-jun is steadily gathering and amassing political capital so that he can utilize these things effectively. It also seems like he has quite the talent for that one too, both above board and underhanded ways. The art is also 8 out of 10. Given that this is more of a political manhwa, there really isn't much in the way of the traditional action sequences that you might expect. However, in its place is more about the social maneuvering required to be able to have people act the way you want them to as a whole for the unit or the society that they live in. It also presents the work that politicians have to go through to win votes, in a way. So if you're a fan of modern political manhwa or wanted to see what someone in the political circle could do with the power of foresight, almost similar to Dr. Shin Son-han, the doctor who sees the future from my previous videos, then Foresighting Politician should definitely be kept in your favorite list. Welcome to the highlight portion of today's video. Our highlight today is Not Your Monster-in-Law, which I noted as although I am a mother-in-law, I do not like conflict between my in-laws previously. Wow, thank you, it's such a shorter title now. I've now read up to chapter 60 on it. Info card description will have links to my original opinion. As a quick reminder, Wilhelmina Layton is the main character of this manhwa. She regained memories of a past life just as her noble family went fully broke, and she was sold off to become the wife of a now deceased duke whom she never got to see in person. For some reason still recognized as the official wife, Wilhelmina has been stuck trying to navigate the delicate politics of the Layton household, considering she is now the mother of the current duke. Within the annex, the exiled portion of the household, Wilhelmina has been happily living a passive life. However, she has been skillfully also making sure she never gets into trouble, albeit that doesn't really last long, as she's pushed in multiple directions by the Duke, the Emperor, and even forgotten companions of old, as a couple of examples. My previous scores for this manhwa were 9 out of 10 for potential and 7 out of 10 for art. The potential translates to an 8 out of 10 for story, as more of the political-based fantasy manhwa, it is quite slow-paced. It fits the narrative and nature of Wilhelmina's approach to this new life. To be quite honest, it's impressive how well she's navigating her life here now considering her background from her past life. At the same time, there has now been some push for romance as well, albeit it's very little right now. The characters gets translated to an 8 out of 10 also, as there are really only a handful of important characters that require our attention. It almost seems like it's gearing up to be quite the romantic annoyance in some ways, but considering the characters that have been introduced, I think most would be able to see where it would develop from here. The art wraps it up to be also 8 out of 10, as I noted in my previous video that it was just a solid manhwa overall, and it actually still is. With the caveat now that Wilhelmina isn't all-knowing, but we actually properly see her internal thought process about how she's trying to really just survive on the fly. Her stepson also, well, that's just something we'll have to see for ourselves, as it's clearly not just fun in games for their particular relationship. Not Your Monster-in-Law, when I covered it last, was an interesting prospect considering it didn't position itself as a romance manhwa at first. Now, it has laid some foundation to go in that direction if needed, but it's still very much staying the course on that political nature of its introduction. Overall, a decent read if you wanted something fantasy romance backdrop, but with a more political focus. Would you agree, or would you not? Comment down below your thoughts on this manhwa. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Write down in the comment section down below what manhwa you've been reading and I might just take a look. Till next time though, have a good read.